you couldn't live in a safer time than right now. I mean, health-wise, medicine can really keep you alive, and security-wise, we're an incredibly secure country. And all of this crime that used to happen without people knowing is now happening. Something's being done about it. People are aware of this sort of thing. So I feel that it's a great time to be alive in this country. I think that every young person in high school should have therapy. I think that there should be a counselor in every school, and every kid should have 1 or 2 hours worth of therapy, talk therapy a month at the minimum. Just because I think someone needs, when you're growing up at that age, you need someone to listen to you and also assure you that you're no different than everybody else. Deepak Chopra once said, it was very interesting, he said that people that are addicts are just trying to find nirvana in a different way. And when he said that, I stopped judging people that take drugs, because I understand that they're doing it because they're trying to achieve a sense of happiness. They just aren't doing it the right way, and they're sacrificing their bodies. Someone told me once to look down at your feet. That's where you're supposed to be. My great-grandfather's motto was always, never sell IBM. And so we didn't, but now I don't know if I even have any IBM stock anymore. I have Apple.
This week, American Real sits down with David Dickinson Schumann, artist, hairstylist, and philanthropist, whose rich history and upbringing brings us back to when his great-grandfather, A. Ward Ford, together with Harlow and Willard Bundy, built CTR, short for Computing-Tabulating-Recording-Company, later hiring Thomas Watson before changing the name to IBM. David takes us on his lifelong journey where he attended art school in the disco era, later finding his passion as a hairstylist and living it out in Boston, a city he thought he would never leave. Our frank discussion touches on when he was bullied in middle school. He opens up about his sexuality, drug addiction, religious and political views, as well as the changes he made in his own life, where he literally found new hope as well as a new home. Today, after 2 heart attacks, he is focused on remaining healthy, as well as his renewed interest in reading, exercise, and meditation. But more importantly, just as he has his entire life, David has a genuine care of all people, giving them new hope to believe in themselves while pointing out we are all fortunate to be living in such a great period of time. Hence, never stop believing. Now, if you like this episode, please share it with your friends, connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and don't forget to subscribe to the American Real YouTube channel to watch this full episode. I'd like to thank our partners and sponsors, including Happy Socks, turning an everyday essential into a colorful design item, and Alitura Naturals, the best all-natural skincare products available. Visit AlituraNaturals.com to make a purchase, and be sure to use the coupon code AMERICAN at checkout for a very special 20% discount. And now, without further ado, I bring to you Mr. David Schumann. Welcome to American Real. This is Roger Brooks, and today my very special guest is David Schumann. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's nice to be here.
Our tagline here at American Real is everyone has a story. And I am just so intrigued and fascinated with your story and your family story and the rich history that it brings really to the world, because when we get into it, we'll talk about IBM and some of the other really interesting businesses that your family was a part of. Mm-hmm. But before we get into that, I stumbled onto something and I thought it was very interesting. We are already connected in a pretty deep way, and I don't think you know that.
No.
Your father, Robert Schuman, had a tremendous passion for wildlife, as I understand it, and he even had his own bird sanctuary and named it the Nuthatch Hollow.
That's right.
And it's on a beautiful 75-acre site in upstate New York, adjacent to Binghamton University. And his favorite bird was the white-breasted nuthatch.
Nuthatch, yeah.
Yeah, and that preserve is one of the reasons we are here. It's one of the reasons American Real exists.
Wow.
Because that is a place that I go to quite often. And my partners and I in this business thought of a lot of the ideas there. So it's very special to me. I've actually brought several of our guests there to shoot part 2 of their episodes. And what a deep connection that was your father's site.
Oh yeah, I spent a lot of time there. I mean, I grew up going up there. We used to, I was very young when they built the house. And it was going to be just a garage because they needed a place to keep equipment. And they decided, well, it didn't cost that much to put a second floor on, so they did. And I can remember when it was just plywood inside, and my first Halloween party we had up there. And I can remember going up there with my father before anything was up there. There was the first building was the used car shack. I used to sit in the middle of the used car lot. When they were done with that and they got a bigger shack, my father took that one and took it all the way to the bottom of the hill, and they plugged it into the light pole there and put in the first bird feeder in front of it. And there were a couple of folding chairs and there was an electric heater in it, and that was it. And the two of us would sit there and watch the birds come and feed. And I learned what bird was what, and that was the beginning of it. And then they built the house, and earth movers came in and they pushed the dirt aside and put that huge dam up and created the pond. And then all the paths were made through it. Just slowly, but surely they created that whole sanctuary. And no one had done anything like that around here. I think it was the first.
It's incredible. And how old were you at the time?
Well, when I start remembering it, it's probably around 7 or 8, but they bought the property, I believe he bought it in 1959, and he bought it from my mother. And we lived on Matthew Street back then, and I think he bought the property to build a house on, and they were going to move up there. And my mother said, "No way in hell. We're not living up there on that hill." There was nothing in Vestal back then. It was just a very tiny town. And the South End was just really kind of getting started, so she wasn't interested in that at all. So he just kept it and we moved to the west side. We lived on Stratford Place instead.
I see. And what was it with the white nuthatch that your father liked?
I think he loved how the bird moved around the tree. He loved how it actually would go upside down, and it would stick the nuts up under the bark. That's how they store all their nuts, and then they'd come back and they'd get the seeds and eat them later on.
Incredible. So, when did your father gift it to the university?
Just when he passed away. That was, it was in his will.
Which was what, 2011?
He passed away in 2011, so I think we actually presented it to them in probably a year later.
I see. And before that, was it leased to the school?
No, there was an arrangement. The school was allowed to come on the property whenever they wanted to, and they put in another pond for frogs and that sort of thing, and they would put up cameras to study the birds. So they always had projects going on there, but that was just an agreement with my father. He was more than happy to let them use it. The local Audubon used it for bird bandings, the Naturalist Club used it, and then the Cannibal Club, they had their meetings, and the RNA, do you know the RNA? Rest and Aspire.
Okay.
They would have their meetings up there. So that a lot of people use the grounds, or some of them use the house. I don't know if you ever were able to go into the house.
No.
It's an interesting place.
Is it still there?
It's still there. The university is tearing down the house, and they're going to be building what's called a living building, which is a very exciting project, because this building is actually going to create 105% of the energy needed to run the building, as well as treat all of its water and sewage. Nothing will actually end up going off the property. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and for me, I just find peace there. I'm able to do some deep thinking. And I just like to spend, I like to go with people as well, but it's a great place to spend alone.
Do you go up around the pond or down below into the woods?
All over. I like to do the upper
stream
trail and near the ravine and down near the pond. We have our favorite, paths.
Yep.
But I like to take the kids, and it's just...
it's an amazing place.
It is.
Yeah, and I think the university are going to be... That was a great idea to give it to them, because I think they'll be good stewards of that land.
So let's talk a little bit more about your father. What's his story?
Well, he grew up in Montclair, New Jersey, and he went to Wesleyan University, ended up breaking his arm and shoulder just when the war was started, so he ended up not being able to fight. So he stayed home, and he ended up moving to Binghamton because the Buick dealership was up for sale. And his Uncle Dave, whom I'm named after, David Dickinson, he gave him the money to buy the dealership. So he bought the dealership and started Schuman Buick. I think it was probably around 1949. That's when he bought the dealership, when it was down on Water Street, right in town. And then years later, he didn't want to run the dealership himself because he never had any time for anything else. So he took on a partner, Billy Venata, and they moved the dealership up to Main Street, and it was Schuman Venata Buick. So the Venatas and our family became very close at that point. And I know Lori Venata, who was a friend of yours.
Yes, who connected us actually.
Right, she's married now. She's a Newman, Lori Newman. But Billy Venata was quite a character, and I got a spanking every time he saw me, just in case, because you never know if I might be bad. And Nelson, his son, ran the used car department. So that shack was where Nelson worked. And then the boathouse at Nuthatch that's there now, that's kind of falling apart, that was the second building that replaced the original shack. And then we took that when they got another building and made the boathouse out of it. So the Buick dealership has always kind of given us a few things. But Nelson worked very hard for the company and then ended up taking over for his father. And the whole reason for the Venatas was so that Billy liked to take the winters off, so he would go to Florida in the winters. And my father would take the summers off, so I always had my father in Connecticut. We would go to Madison, Connecticut for the summer. and my dad was able to be with me all that time.
David, tell us about your grandfather, John Schuman.
John J.
John J.
John J. Schuman Jr. Well, a lot of people haven't. We never talked as much about him as we always did about my grandmother's grandfather. And I think John J. was an amazing guy because he grew up in the Bronx. His mother and father were poor. The father was a stone cutter. And I can remember hearing stories when he and his little brother needed their tonsils removed. His mother gave him 50 cents and sent them on the train. They took the train down to Battery Park. They both got their tonsils removed and came home. Mother didn't go at all. It's like I can't imagine what life was like back then. But he had to quit school at 13 to help support his family. And then he put himself through night school. And he ended up getting a job selling Liberty bonds during World War I. And at the end of World War I, he had made so many connections that he got all these job offers. And one of them was for this little company. There was only 5 employees, and it was General Motors Acceptance Corporation. And within a short period of time, he ended up being chairman of the board. And
Of General Motors.
GMAC.
GMAC.
And GMAC at that time was not what we think of now. It was car dealers had one car of each model on the lot. That's how they sold cars. And then you placed your order for the car, and then you had to wait for it to be delivered. So GM created GMAC to finance the dealership so that they could buy stock. And they would buy many cars, and they would finance that through GMAC, and it's still actually the way they do it today. So
where they charge interest and
right to the dealership.
Right.
But now you can buy homes, you can buy cars. I mean, GMAC is now just a financial institution.
And he worked his way up to be chairman.
He was chairman of the board for many years. He retired as chairman in the late 1950s.
Okay, and then before him, great-grandfather.
My great-grandfather, which was my grandmother's, his wife's father, A. Ward Ford,
A. Ward Ford.
Right, Austin Ward Ford was his name.
Okay.
So he was born in Deposit. His father, William Lavinder Ford, was a merchant in Deposit. I mean, I can trace the family all the way back to 1650 through the Fords.
And why was there a change between the Fords and Schuman?
It was Florence Ford, my grandmother, who married John J. Schuman. So that's how the name change happened.
Okay.
But there's still a lot of Fords, like my father's Robert Ford Schuman. My brother is R. Ford Schuman Jr. I have Uncle Ward Ford. My sister's Lola Ford. So Ford is still a very big name in the family. But Florence, his daughter, married John J. Schuman.
Let's see.
So A. Ward, or us, we called him, I never met him, but he was always referred to as A. Ward, or Ward Schuman. He started working for the Bundy brothers, and it was Harlow and Willard Bundy. Harlow was, I believe, I sometimes get it mixed up, but I believe Harlow was the jeweler, and Willard was a lawyer. And they went to a world exposition in Europe, I don't know what year, and they brought back one of these clocks that would mark time for employers to keep track of their employees' time. And Harlow tinkered around with it and came up with his own version of a time clock. And they started Bundy Time Recorder, and A. Ward was the secretary. And at one time it was just the 3 of them. In fact, I remember my father showing me the first ledger. It was my grandfather's ledger, and it had listed how many rubber bands and paper clips they had. I mean, it was that small company, tiny. And they grew, and they were down on Water Street in Binghamton, and they grew that company and became International Time Recorder, or ITR. And then they started branching out and buying other companies, and they bought a cash register company, and they bought various other business machines, including this Harlow tabulator, which they weren't quite sure what to do with, but they thought it was something that might do something in the future.
They bought the business?
They bought the business, yes.
Okay.
Harlow never sold them the patent to the machine, but they owned the business. And at that point, they became Computing, Tabulating, and Recording. And then my great-grandfather, A. Ward, hired Thomas Watson. And Watson came in and he changed the name of the company to IBM. So really, it was in the beginning. You know, IBM says they started their company when Watson named IBM. That was the beginning of IBM. But IBM started with the Bundy brothers. And the Bundy Museum right here in town is really, tells that story quite well.
So where did they find Tom Watson?
I don't know the story completely, but I believe Watson was fired from National Register. He worked for National Register.
Okay.
And he was looking for a job at that point, and I'm not quite sure how my great-grandfather found out about him, but he thought it was a good idea to bring him on board.
And did the family stay involved after Watson?
Well, my great-grandfather worked for the company up until 1929 was when he retired, and they gave him a big party at the Arlington Hotel here in Binghamton. The whole train full of IBM executives came up from New York, and they actually had a special train put together. My grandmother saved everything, so they had the menus and all the cards from the train, and they arrived, and there was this big ceremony, and it was October 29th, 1929. I don't know if that date, if you know anything about that date.
Tell me.
That is during the crash, the Great
Depression.
The crash just before the Great Depression. And that was when his retirement party was going on. And there's this wonderful photograph of the ballroom, everybody sitting there and nobody looking very happy because they're losing everything. My grandfather, John Jay, couldn't leave GMAC because he had to stay back because the crash was going on right then. And Uncle Tink, who worked for IBM, he couldn't come because of that. But Watson was there, and I have a gold coin, 18 karat gold coin that they gave my great-grandfather for his retirement, which proves that IBM was, at that time, they considered themselves, in 1929, they were giving him his 40th anniversary retirement. So, you know, their dates are a little bit strange.
Was there some bitterness there between the family and IBM?
No. Well, maybe my father. I mean, never appreciated the fact that IBM did not. You know, it's kind of like after A. Ward was gone, it was never mentioned really again. But you know, I guess there was a little bit with my father, and I feel it too. But I remember that my dad had a framed time clock key, because the original time clocks, a tape ran through the clock, and the time was printed on the tape. And then an employee would come in and they had a key. Each employee had a key, and they would put the key into the clock and turn the key, and that would print their symbol on the tape at the time when they would check in and check out. So I think another thing that he received was this key that said number 1 on it. And my father, that was that in the ledger, he didn't quite know what to do with it. And I thought, these are very valuable items. I said, I think you should give them back to IBM for their history. And then IBM years later comes out with a 100-year, and that did not make me feel great, because I think that that history is not quite right. And according to IBM, they bought Bundy. You know, no, IBM did not buy Bundy time recorder. They're an outgrowth of it.
Was the Bundy family and your family part of IBM's growth, as far as did they have any stock in the company?
Oh yeah. the Bundys especially. And my grandmother, her, let me think, her aunts had married Bundys. Harlow and Willard Bundy married my great-grandmother's sisters. So it was, the family was, I also have an incredible picture of the Bundys and the Schumans, and my grandmother's like 5 years old in the picture. Wonderful photograph. And the perambulators in the front. It's a great picture of the whole family in Oneonta, because that's where my great-grandmother was from, Oneonta. And she was a Ford as well, which is very unusual. She and my great-grandfather were third cousins once removed. So the family tree it spreads out and then it comes back together again.
Right. It's interesting, does the family today, like the stock from back then, almost 100 years ago,
yeah,
does that still exist?
We've got diversified, almost all that stock is gone.
Okay.
Because IBM is no longer, but we certainly held on to it. My great-grandfather's motto was always never sell IBM, and so we didn't.
Right.
But when I received my first money, it was all IBM stock. But the first thing the bank did was diversify, because they had to.
Sure.
It was all our eggs were in one basket.
Right.
But now I don't know if I even have any IBM stock anymore. I have Apple. but no, I remember my grandparents got 100 shares of IBM for their wedding gift. My grandmother used to keep track of it. So she had it on a sheet of paper. Every time it would split, she would track it. And it split and split and split so many times, she said that she had to stop keeping track of it because it was embarrassing. And with that money, she and her husband started the John and Florence Schuman Foundation, which mainly helped New Jersey in the beginning. But then it grew and it became national. And years ago, NPR, you would often hear a lot of I think All Things Considered, was funded by the John and Florence Schuman Foundation. And then after my grandmother died, my father got Bill Moyers to come on board, and he is the chairman of the foundation. It's now called the Schuman Center for Media and Democracy. And now that my father's passed on, they're getting ready to spend that down and dissolve that foundation. But they're trying to, influence politics in a liberal way.
Philanthropy is a big part of your family's legacy, correct?
Yes, there's also the Robert F. Schuman Foundation, which started after my father passed away. Most of his money went into a foundation.
I see.
And my brother and I are the advisors of that. And two things that we've recently given to were we give regularly to Binghamton University, as well as Robertson Center, and actually the Boys and Girls Club of Binghamton, just because we have roots here in this town.
And does the foundation go beyond this area?
Oh yeah, we are doing work with. Right now, we're doing a large project with Connecticut Audubon, New York Audubon, and Florida Audubon, and we're trying to. We're working on the Atlantic Flyway, conserving coastal property so that the birds have a place to land as they're coming up and down the coast. And we also do work with Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and they're doing media projects to help certain conservation groups get their points across either to the public or to the government. And they do this media for free for these groups. Another project we're doing is for Wesleyan. We're starting the Schuman Environmental Studies College at Wesleyan, which is very exciting. My father was a really staunch environmentalist.
Yeah, it sounds like so. So you just said something that amazed me. So the Audubon project is for birds to land.
So they'll have places to land
as they're migrating down
the Atlantic Flyway. Yeah, because it's endangered.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've taken so much coastline away that These birds have no place to go as they're going up and down the coast. But one of the interesting things that global warming is doing is these large storms that come through, like Hurricane Sandy, destroyed a lot of houses. And what we found from Audubon is that they are no longer offering flood insurance to a lot of these properties. So people can't rebuild. They're getting paid,
but they
can't reinsure. So they're abandoning their property, and then Audubon's coming along and taking up conserving the property. So this is a new thing there.
So that's turning something into a positive.
Yeah, I think it's really great.
Yeah, interesting.
But it's one of the good things that's happening out of global warming.
Tell us about your upbringing.
Well, I never understood, all the history and anything other than I was just a child of a car dealer growing up. I went to public school, I went to Alexander Hamilton, and I went to West Junior. And then I did go to private school after that. My father went to private school, my brother went to the same school, and I went to the same school. At that point, I did start to realize that maybe I wasn't the same as everybody else. But basically, I was raised upper middle class right near Lord's Hospital, Stratford Place, and it was nice. There were a lot of kids on Lord's Road, so I played with those kids and kind of had a normal childhood. Loved going to Rec Park and riding the merry-go-round.
Which the area is known for all of its carousels.
Yeah, and the carousel was better back then. I mean, Harvey Rail, who lived in Vestal, he had restored and kept all of the orchestrons that were with the merry-go-rounds. He kept those working. For a while there, it was just simply a tape that played, which was really kind of sad. But when I was a kid, it was loud, and that was my favorite part, was listening to that. Harvey Rail was a friend, and my father would take me on trips. That was one of the things that my father did was nice. I remember he took me to the press building, and we got to understand how newspapers were printed. And, he took me to Harvey Rail's, and I got to see how he restored all these musical instruments. And I was very interested in any kind of mechanical thing. I love stuff like that. And actually, I have a piano that Harvey Rail restored at home, a 1923 Francis Bacon player piano.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool.
That's a nice keepsake.
Yeah, it was. My mother and father gave it to me when I was like 7 or 8 years old, and it worked for a while, and then it didn't work any longer. And a while ago, my father wanted to get rid of it, and he asked me if I wanted it back, and I said sure, and I sent it out to a guy in New Jersey and had it restored, and so now it's working. And that's a memory of when I was a child growing up. My mother would play the piano, and I would sit next to her, and we would sing old songs. So now I can have those memories again with the piano. But we were talking earlier about Wonder, and how Wonder is really a story about bullying, and there was a lot of bullying in my childhood.
Was there?
Oh yeah, West Junior was a tough school, and I can remember times when I would have to walk through people's backyards to get home so that no one would see me, just so I wouldn't get picked on. There was a lot of fighting and stuff like that.
And was that typical? Were other kids being bullied as well?
Yeah, there were other kids being bullied, and it was always much older kids that were in our same class because they flunked out so many times. There was a boy, Campbell DeLuca, that was always picking on most of the kids in our class, and he would try to arrange fights. So he'd take two kids and say, "You're going to fight each other," and if you didn't, he would beat you up. And I'm like, well, just the way to get around it was I would sneak out of school and go through backyards. I figured it out.
Right.
But it was normal back then, and West Junior required kids, boys, swam in the nude. Yeah, in swim class, we weren't allowed to wear bathing suits. Really strange. And I never quite understood. The girls wore swimsuits, but the boys didn't. And the locker room, there were no lockers. It was just a bench around a room. So it was just a big open room.
This was in the 60s?
Yeah. And, you know, kids would snap towels and just torture each other. I hated it. It was not fun at all. You know, and I think kids always sense, because I'm gay, I think kids can sense that there's something different about you when you're a kid. I mean, I didn't know I was gay back then, but they sensed it. And so they torture you about it. And I got tortured in prep school too. But you learn how to keep secrets, and you learn how to, you know, keep your personality down so that nobody finds out. I think it's a little bit easier today because it's a lot more accepted.
Mm-hmm. What was your experience like at the private school?
It was a little bit easier because I was probably more nerdish, and there were kids that were the nerds, so I was able to hang out with those kids. And I ended up having a bunch of friends, but there were some tough times. You know, the jocks would come for you, and no one would help you out when that happened. And there were no locks on the door, so kids can go into your room and do whatever they wanted to. So that would sometimes happen.
And you say you didn't know then that you were gay.
No, I didn't figure it out until I was 20, 21. And there was no name for it back then. You know, the word gay didn't even exist. Before 1969, I was totally unaware of the Stonewall riots. I didn't know any of that was going on. But they used different words. They used queer and faggot were words. Homosexual was the more polite word. But the word gay had not been invented. So I could hardly call myself a faggot or queer or homosexual. I just couldn't accept that. I just thought what I wanted was probably I'd grow out of it. You know, I just expected things would get better. But they never did. I just got more, I just buried it more and more. And then I went to art school in Portland, Maine. I went to Portland School of Art. And there were gay people that were actually, they were gay and they were out. And I remember some of the juniors and seniors, they had a lottery. They would make guesses as to which of the freshmen were gay, and they placed bets. I found out about it later, and it was kind of funny. But it was interesting when I finally realized one night, I was like, I am gay. And I remember going to school and telling one of my classmates that I knew was gay, that I think I'm gay, and coming out to them. And then them taking me out for my first time to a gay bar.
And back then, it was obviously a much different time. Did you feel shameful, or did you feel like...
Portland, Maine was this really strange city because there were a lot of gay people there. There were transgendered people, there were transsexuals, and there were gay people. There were 3 gay bars in Portland, Maine. Not anymore. But it was like the townspeople had no idea what was going on. They thought they were just nice boys or something, I don't know. But all this went on without anybody really knowing about it. And it wasn't that underground. So there really wasn't a lot of shame. And
You felt comfortable there.
I felt very comfortable. Yeah. And I was in art school, so there were gay people in art school. And then I quit art school at one point, and I went into hairdressing. I went to beauty school. And in beauty school, there were transgender, there were transsexuals, and there were gay people. And hairdressers were the coolest people in the 70s. You know, it's like the party didn't start until a hairdresser arrived. You know, there was the stars of disco. It was a disco era. So I really kind of fit right in, and I opened up and really became myself at that point.
And how old were you at that point? Maybe late 20s?
1978, I was 20, 22, 21, 22. So yeah, it's a big time in my life.
And what about your family? Did they accept it okay?
They were like, my sister, I came out to my younger sister and I told her, and she said, well, I always kind of thought so. And then she told my family, and my father was like, my mother had passed away at that point. My father said, yeah, and what else is new? Like, they all knew. And I'm sure my mother knew. So they
But
weren't
never
bothered.
treated you any differently.
No. The only time it was ever an issue, and it wasn't really an issue, was during the AIDS crisis. They were more concerned about, illness, and I had a partner that died of AIDS, so they were worried about, like everybody else, they were worried about getting infected.
Right, your health.
And my health and their health,
Mhm.
They weren't, they thought you could get it off a toilet seat or a cup or something like that. In fact, I
Just a lack of
remember
education back then.
my stepmother asking me, do you have separate glassware and dishware for him? And I'm like, no. You were more likely to give them something than they were going to give you something.
I was in Phoenix this week, and I had the opportunity to meet Magic Johnson.
Yeah, he was
And,
inspirational.
Very inspirational. And I think, for me at least anyway, it just brought a sense of, okay, this is real, but it can be beaten, right? And
Yeah.
it brought the awareness, and a lot of awareness, so that people weren't afraid, terrified. I can remember other players didn't want to play with them on the same court. Well,
Yeah.
they disputed that, right? And it said you can't, catch it through sweat, etc. And then he eventually retired.
Right. Well, I the thing for me, what happened being in Boston, because I was living in Boston by the time the crisis really hit, and my best friend and I, the last time we did the AIDS walk, we basically shouted out names of friends that had died, and we didn't have to. We never stopped the whole walk. I didn't realize that we'd lost 200-300 friends. So basically, everybody I knew died. Why I ended up surviving and not coming down with it, it's like a miracle. Because I was surrounded by everybody I knew and partners that died. We didn't know to be safe until much later. And when I first got tested, I can remember it was really hard to believe the results, that they were negative. So I feel very lucky.
Did you, at that point, try to prepare and convince yourself that?
Oh yeah, I thought,
Probably had it.
when this is when my partner at the time was diagnosed and came down with AIDS. I had the flu at that time, so I thought for sure I have it too. And they said, well, you should go get tested. And I got tested. And when she came in, she said negative. I didn't believe her. She had to show me the paper, and I read on it, zero antibodies, and it was the proof. So, and then I got tested again and again, and never showed any positive. So it was pretty incredible.
Yeah. Was it painful for you to watch your partner at the time
Oh yeah,
die?
that was very difficult. But at the same time, he was 19 years older than I was, and we had a really good relationship while we were together, and I'm still very close to his daughters. He was married and had kids before he came out. So I feel like when I met him, I had problems with drugs, cocaine to be specific, and he ended up getting me into recovery and was the first person that actually got me to love myself and to appreciate who I was. So I kind of felt like there was a purpose in our relationship. He saved me and I really saved him, because he died with dignity. And my father actually was very helpful at the end, because we needed round-clock nursing. And rather than doing it in an institution, we were able to do it at home, because my father hired the nurses to care for him so that I could
Much
get
more
sleep.
comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was really proud of my father for doing that. He just accepted, like my husband now, we're married, and when we got married, my father considered us married just like every one of his kids, and everything that he would do for any of his children, he did for me. So it was very even.
And that had to make you feel real proud.
Very much. I'm very proud of my father for his liberal beliefs. I remember when Obama was running, we lived in the summertime, we lived in Madison, Connecticut, and he had these houses on the shoreline, and Madison was a very Republican town. and he had 3 Obama signs out in front of the houses. He had 3 houses, so he had 3 signs. And I can remember out there walking one of our dogs, and one of the neighbors coming up to me and saying, "Your grandfather would be shocked to see this." And I was like, no, I think my grandfather would have probably been okay with it, but it was none of their business. Anyway, I just was proud of my father for standing up and being proud of who he was.
When do you think society is going to, if ever, get past all this hate that we have?
Well, certainly not with the current administration in office. They're feeding a lot of it. But I think the last elections were very inspirational. Certainly with our first transgendered official being elected into office, I think that was amazing. I really think that Democrats came out in force and finally stepped up and voted. And I think a lot of younger people, what has to happen is that younger people have to realize that their vote matters, and they have to start getting involved. I can remember when I had my salon in Boston, when the war was going to start, Bush was going to start the war after 9/11, that there was a peace march coming down Boylston Street. And I thought, wow, a peace march, how great. And I had staff were out on the street watching it, and they all came running in scared. I'm like, what are you scared of? And they said, there's this mob of people coming down the street. They'd never seen anything like this before in their lives. And they were kind of frightened by it. And I said, there's nothing to be frightened of. It's a peace rally. Yeah, it's a mob, but they're not violent. And I went out and went like this, and they were like, wow, they got it. And they started getting into it. But it just shows that youth are not used to protesting and getting involved because they've never done it before.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that's our right in a free America, right? To be able to.
Absolutely, it's part
protest.
of that's what America's about is being able to protest. I mean, the Revolutionary War was a protest against the British. So I mean, our country has always protested and been able and proud of it. So we just have to get back to that. I mean, I think that what's gone right now is that discourse is considered a bad thing, but I think it's a good thing. We need to talk. We need to argue. And we need to listen to each other, because I think that you can't have a good society without Republican and Democrat balancing each other. I mean, personally, I'm a moderate, and I think it's very disconcerting when you see people blocking each other on Facebook because of their politics, or people calling each other names because of their political feelings. It's like, I think we should respect each other's right to have an opinion. And, I think we need to discuss that. And Congress and the Senate need to stop looking at each other's side as playing a political game, and rather be a Republican and be a Democrat and discuss the issues from either side and argue and whatever. I mean, who is the senator who's not going to run? Is it Flocker?
Yeah.
I thought he stated it quite beautifully. He's leaving because there's no more discussion about the issues. They're discussing politics as a game. Are you going to how to get reelected?
If you had a platform on Capitol Hill, what would you say?
That would be my platform. Everybody needs to come to the middle.
Yeah.
And discuss it.
So I think about, and I understand you're talking about politics here, but I think about racial relations, sexual preference, even religious preference. There's just so much diversity, and what I don't understand is.
But there's so much animosity at the same time. It's like.
And I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say. There's so much animosity and hate, and why can't people just do what they feel is best for them?
Well, I think one of the things that is good is the fact that more is out in the open. I mean, the media is a big game player in all of this. I think that you can't have rape, you can't have violent crime, you can't have sexual molestation without it coming out. Everything's coming out, nothing's hiding anything. And it's causing people who are somewhat addicted to the media to thinking that all of this is happening now that didn't happen before, which is, you're just fooling yourself. All of this happened years ago and worse. In the 1800s, people were treated like animals at times, but no one ever talked about it. And now with cell phones, nothing happens without someone taking a picture of it or a video. So you can think that all of this is happening because of the media, but it's not. The media is just bringing it to everyone's attention.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I've been working on a novel for several years and doing a lot of research, and part of it is about the Inquisition and what happened back then, and it's awful.
It's brutal.
And we're not obviously not taught those things in school.
No.
But you're right. This has been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years.
And people thought back in the 50s was the good old days,
Right.
Well, not so much.
That's right.
I mean, just everybody kept quiet about it. People didn't speak about it. And there is a group of people that would like to restrict that again. And let's not talk about it. Let's pretend that everything is wonderful again. Let's make America great again. I mean, that's just that stupid idea that if we say that and don't talk about the bad stuff, it'll go away and America will be great again. I think America is great. I think that all of this is great. It's just part of the, it's a growing pain that we're going through right now. We're learning how to deal with all this technology and all this access to everything. We have access to, I can pick up my cell phone now and access all this information that I could never do before. And people are addicted to it, like you see people with their cell phones constantly. They're not present any longer. They're into their cell phone because it's so interesting to know all this stuff. But at some point, I'm sure that people will get their fill of it and life will get a little bit more natural, and it just takes time. I just choose not to judge it all the time, but just to be aware of it,
And where do you fit in as far as trying to remain present?
With my cell phone and stuff like that, I like media, and I like, I don't watch the news because I find that everyone's news is slanted some way. Probably the only news I watch, which is probably slanted, is Bill Moyers writes a letter every day, an email, and it's a bunch of different articles. That's probably all I do, and I read The Week. I like The Week, and that's my news source. But that helps me stay a little bit more present, because if I watch the news, oh my God, the world is falling apart. Everything is just happening, and yet, you couldn't live in a safer time than right now. I mean, health-wise, medicine can really keep you alive, and security-wise, we're an incredibly secure country. And all of this crime that used to happen without people knowing is now happening. Something's being done about it. People are aware of this sort of thing. So I feel that it's a great time to be alive in this country. But then, as far as your cell phone, if I'm going to use my cell phone, I use it when I'm alone. But when there's somebody in front of me, it's an opportunity. I put it down, and I'll shut it off a lot. Or when I run, I don't have my cell phone, or I don't call people when I'm on the train or on a plane. I enjoy my time with wherever I'm at. I enjoy that. Someone told me once to look down at your feet. That's where you're supposed to be. And so I take that as something that I practice regularly, being present.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I'll tell you, when I go to meetings, when I'm on the road, it's just unbelievable that the way people interact, or, when
they're distracted.
They're so distracted, and they're on their phones in the meeting when you're talking to them.
Right.
or they'll excuse themselves and get up and take a phone call.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
I mean, we were at a party last night and people were sitting there while people were talking to them and looking on their phone. And, you know, I don't want to judge that because I really think that it is very seductive. The media is extremely seductive. And I myself can get addicted to it. And I've dealt with that as an addiction. Because when I went through my cocaine addiction, I went through recovery, I understood that I'm an addict. So I always have to look at everything that I do because I get seduced by things and then I get involved in them and then other things suffer. I had a smartphone before anybody else did. So of course I was like, my nose was in it constantly, but then I realized, you know, I was missing out on things. So then I just noticed the fact that maybe I should put the phone down. Maybe I should turn the computer off. Maybe, you know, I should step away from the TV. And there are some interesting things going on out there.
What advice would you have for some young people who have experimented with drugs or thinking about it?
Oh, that's a big question. Personally, I think that every young person in high school should have therapy. I think that there should be a counselor in every school, and every kid should have 1 or 2 hours worth of therapy, talk therapy a month at the minimum. Just because I think someone needs, when you're growing up at that age, you need someone to listen to you and also assure you that you're no different than everybody else. I think that alone would help people not turn to drugs. But Deepak Chopra once said, it's very interesting, he said that people that are addicts are just trying to find nirvana in a different way. And when he said that, I stopped judging people that take drugs, because I understand that they're doing it because they're trying to achieve a sense of happiness. They just aren't doing it the right way, and they're sacrificing their bodies. I just hope that they can. I think hitting bottom is very important, you know, in any addict's life. Is once you're on that path, you need to go all the way, because you're just not going to turn around until something big happens. Mm-hmm. But as far as experimenting with them, you know, I hope that they can rather find someone that they can talk to. But, you know, it's a moot point. I mean, a child's going to do what a kid's going to do. I mean, if their parents aren't paying any attention to them, their noses are buried in cell phones. You know, I see a lot of that where parents aren't paying any attention to their toddlers or their children. Toddlers and little kids are engaged. They could care less about technology. They're present. And their parents are like this. It's, you know, I wonder what's going to happen to them.
Right.
You know?
I have a friend who owns a restaurant bar, and he was telling me a story that some of the university kids were there and, you know, walked in the bathroom stall, and guys and girls were in there doing cocaine.
Yep.
So it's very, very prevalent. I mean, it's happening all the time, so you really have to pay attention to your kids.
During my time in the disco era, cocaine was king. I mean, we all did coke. Everybody did it because we didn't think there was anything wrong with it. In fact, in the 70s, the government released findings saying that cocaine was one of the few drugs that was not addictive. Got that one really wrong.
Yes, they did.
But yeah, cocaine was a big deal, more so than now. Now heroin, because of the drug companies are really at fault with a lot of it because they pushed legislation through that blocked the government's ability to shut down opiate usage and make it more difficult for them. And that's actually being battled in Congress right now. They're trying to reverse a lot of that. And I hope that they are successful, because if they are, maybe the government can take action on the war on drugs. Because opiates are really the biggest problem right now. Cocaine is not as big a problem as it used to be.
I heard a stat that 75 people per day are ODing and dying.
I know. It's
Yeah.
like the biggest killer in this country right now is heroin.
And the opioid, the prescription drugs. It's
When they can get it.
That's right.
But a lot of the opiates that are prescription drugs were manufactured and distributed by drug companies illegally through pharmacies. The whole thing was it was an illegal chain. It's still happening now, and it's black market. But the drug companies are well aware of it. They're participating, and they are actually profiting from it.
And it's all about the almighty dollar, right?
Oh yeah. Well, that's probably one of the most corrupting influences in the country right now. Is that people are enamored of money, and I can't blame them. I mean, when you look at TV and you see reality TV, the Kardashians, a perfect example. That family. There's nothing inherently great about the Kardashian family. They have not done anything that, except they have used the media in such a way that they've made a lot of money, and their whole life is about excesses and money. And young people watch that stuff, and a lot of young people today, all they're interested in is celebrity. It's so artificial, and the funny thing is that you speak to most real celebrities, and they're like, the thing that adds most to their life is not their celebrity. If anything, that's the thing they dread the most. So it's just a very perverse cycle. I really wonder what's going to happen to kids. And then also another issue I think is, sounds strange, but so many kids going to university or colleges that really don't need to. We are really lacking in skilled labor in this country.
The trades.
And they can make a lot of money doing that. I went to art college because I was not interested in a liberal arts education. And I was interested, I went into hairdressing because I felt it was a lot of fun and it was creative, and I made a lot of money. I owned a large salon in Boston. I had 30 employees.
Wow.
We did $35,000 a week in sales. So I did very well in that business. But I think that now, if I was a young person now, I would definitely look into the trades. I think you can live a really good life that way. I would hate to see someone start their life with $80,000 to $100,000 in debt and no way to make any money. I agree that there's elements of a liberal arts education that add to your life, and I think people should be able to learn and understand. I'm not against that. I just think that it's a pity to spend so much money on something that you're not sure that you're even going to be able to use.
Well, yeah, it's definitely something for people to consider today.
Yeah.
Because there is a shortage of
Huge. It's
trade. Yeah. David, what's your relationship with money?
With money? How so? What do you mean by that?
Well, obviously you've had access to it through your family. Mm-hmm. You've done very well for yourself through your business. I think a lot of people get caught up on money as far as that's their reason for being. They have to. And I think it's when you could, and I've been trying really hard to do this the last few years, is let that go. Mm-hmm. Just focus on doing the best you could do every day, and the money will follow. If you do good things in the world, it will be returned to you. So
Absolutely.
I'm just curious.
I agree with that. I think that you never should. Focusing on money is ridiculous. It doesn't money itself has no value. But the things that what you can do with money has a tremendous amount of value. I think to focus on money it's not a great place to focus. Focusing on the positive impact that you can make with money is a great thing. Focusing on what you are able to offer the world is a great way to make money. Doing what you love and being able to make money at it is probably one of the greatest joys that you can have. And then being able to retire and use that money to do the things that you'd like to see done in the world is incredible. So, you know, there are a few people in this world that end up getting to do that. I always thought being a hairdresser I wanted to work every day and felt so blessed that this could be something that I could do every day and love it. I get to do what I love, and I get to make a lot of money doing it. And I had people sitting in my chair all the time complaining about their work, and they hated their jobs and they just didn't like their life. And it's like, why are you doing that then? Why don't you take a risk and do what you want to do? Plan B, the book Plan B, it was a great book because I have known more people that Plan B has just been the greatest thing that happened to them. And usually after some horrible catastrophe, you know, I went to art school and it was just terrible. And I remember walking into the administration building and saying, how do I resign? And they said, well, we need a letter of resignation. I said, give me a piece of paper. I wrote it out, handed it to her. I literally walked around the corner of the beauty college and said, I'd like to join. And they had a class starting the next week. And I never looked back.
And that was your plan. And then
that was Plan B, for sure.
Hairdressing.
And then after I sold the business, you know, after 21 years of doing it, I was pretty exhausted. It is a hard job, but actually, what isn't? You know, I mean, people think celebrities, you know, actors have a great life because they make all this money. They work really hard. I think chefs work really hard to do their job. Anybody who really loves their work, they put everything into it. And after a while, you're done. And I sold the business, and then I was able to go back to art school, of all things. I went to Lime Academy in Old Lyme, Connecticut, and studied painting, and now I'm painting again, and I'm really enjoying that.
That's wonderful. We're teaching a course right now at American Reel called Master Your Life Story.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about helping people match their talents with their desires to fill their needs, right? Mm-hmm. And what you just explained you said it very well. And sometimes I think people need to take a step back and not be afraid to think about Plan B, because it's more important to be happy in your day-to-day
Exactly.
life versus, you know, unhappy and okay.
But that's hard though when you have children and you have a family to support.
It's very hard.
You can't necessarily drop everything, but what you have to do is then take what little time you have to yourself and invest that time in something risky and something that you love.
Totally agree.
It's kind of like what you're doing here. I mean, you're doing that yourself. And I think that a lot of people just don't want to put that effort in because they're afraid that it's not going to do anything.
Yeah, they have that resistance, right?
Right.
Yeah, of maybe being successful.
Yeah. But yeah, the people that sat in my chair and hated their jobs, I would try, quite often in the financial sector, I would say, you should try something different. But they're stuck. They're making so much money at what they're doing that they don't know how to get off that merry-go-round.
Well, it's interesting. Brian Rose, who started London Reel, where I received my inspiration from and trained under him, he was a banker in London. Mm-hmm. And he made all this money, but was really unhappy and said, I want to be a broadcaster. Yeah. So he one day up and quit. He started London Reel, and it took him 3 years before he saw $1, but he was happy doing what he loved, and that's just sitting down and conversing with people, sharing these stories with the world, and now it's really caught on. So those type of stories, give me inspiration, mm-hmm. and hopefully, even our discussion will inspire some people to think, within themselves about their own Plan B.
Well, I think Plan B is a really great thing to at least think about. I know that one of the things that you asked about my relationship with money, and I came from a family that had money, and so there was always naturally that net that I had under me. And the hardest thing to deal with was a lot of people discounted what I did because I always had that net under me. They're like, well, your family had money, so you didn't have anything to worry about. But I think that it doesn't matter how much money you have. You always worry about it. And there's also shame and failure no matter whether you have money to fall back on or not. So when you risk, even though you might have money to bail yourself out, when you risk, you're still risking because it's embarrassing to fail. And yet, you have to learn how to fail in order to succeed anyway.
Yeah.
I think failure is something that, another thing in this country, people have to learn to fail a little bit more because failing is learning. That's how you learn and that's how you move forward. And when people fail, I think that we should, as a culture, congratulate someone at taking that risk and learning what's the lesson you learned. Let's move forward, rather than turning away in shame.
So David, let's talk about your health. You had a pretty big scare a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah, I had a heart attack. Actually, I had two. I had a heart attack in, I think, 2013 maybe. And that was in Connecticut. And I was flown to Yale, New Haven, and had a stent put in. And
what happened that day?
Oh, it was pretty strange. I had back pain, of all things. It was behind my shoulder blade, and I'd had pain there before, but it was a little different. And I remember a friend of mine trying to massage it, and nothing seemed to touch it. It just didn't feel right. And I was driving back from that friend's with another friend in the car, and I said, we were going by an emergency room, and I said, I'm just going to go in and have them look at this because this just doesn't seem right. And my friend said, why don't we just go home and you can take a couple Tylenol if you feel better. We'll come. If you don't feel better, we'll come back. And I'm like, nah, we're right here. We'll just go in. So I went in. They took my blood pressure, and as soon as they took the blood pressure, they said, we're going to move you over to the emergency side. And before I knew it, I was in a bed with They said, put this under your tongue. I knew that was probably nitroglycerin. I started feeling better immediately, and then they started giving me blood pressure drugs, and the next thing I knew, the doctor said, we're going to send you to Yale, New Haven to have some pictures taken of your heart. The helicopter will be here in 10 minutes. I'm like, helicopter? And they just played it down. They said, well, the lab is open right now. We want to get you in there fast. The traffic is not good. So they just kept it very calm. I went in and they put this huge x-ray machine on top of you, right over you, and I could watch on these monitors, and they go in through your wrist. It's amazing. And they gave me something to relax me, and they installed a stent, and the only thing that hurt was when they put the pressure bandage on. Went into recovery and had an egg salad sandwich and a ginger ale. Spent the night, and the next morning I was out. It was less than 24 hours in the hospital. And then I went into cardiac rehab after a couple weeks. And they were like, everything's fine. I had a cardiologist and was working out and taking care of myself, and moved to New Hope, Pennsylvania. And then it was like a week after my 60th birthday, and I had the worst indigestion. All of a sudden, this ball of hot acid felt like came up, and it was horrible. And I took a drink of cool water, and that kind of cooled it down. And it happened again, and I took another drink, and it didn't really feel any different. And I said, I'm going to check my blood pressure. So I checked my blood pressure. It was wicked high, and my heart rate was elevated. And I'm like, this isn't good. So I told my partner, I think I need to go to the emergency room. I drove. And I can't believe that I drove. And we drove to Doylestown Hospital.
How far was that?
It was about a 20-minute drive, but they're one of the top 50 heart hospitals in the country. And I told them I thought I was having a heart attack, and they took me back and did an EKG immediately, and it didn't show anything particularly, so they put me out in the waiting room. I waited a couple hours, and then they took me in and they did the enzyme test, and there's a test where they check to see if you've had a heart attack, you release a certain enzyme. And a 4 is a full-on heart attack, 0 is no heart attack. It was a 2.1 or something like that. So they said something definitely happened, but they weren't sure what. So they put me on blood thinners and scheduled me to have cardiac catheterization, which was what I had for the stent. So they went in through my wrist, and they were out in like 15 minutes. I thought that was rather strange. And they said, you have 60% blockage in 3 of your major arteries. And I was like, wow. So they said, well, you could do stents, and or you might want to do bypass surgery. The guy who does bypass surgery said I could do stents, and the guy who does stents said I could do bypass surgery. So it was really confusing as to what to do. I decided to do bypass because it's longer lasting, and at my age, I just really felt it's time to take care of it. And I had no idea any of this was happening. I had no idea that I had high cholesterol. It doesn't run in my family. So I had to stay in the hospital for a week while they got me off of the blood thinner so they could perform the surgery. And then I went in and I had the surgery done. And this hospital, they don't even use a recovery room. They take you right back to your room. They had a special wing that's just for open heart surgery. It's amazing care. There's 7 beds in this one wing, 6 nurses and a physician's assistant on duty. So you pretty much had your own nurse. And I was really well cared for, I thought. It was a tough recovery. Open heart surgery is not fun, but it's amazing how quick you recover from it. I mean, with less than 24 hours, I was out of bed. And in 48 hours, I was walking down the hallway. I had a surgery on Monday. I was released on Saturday. Went home.
Incredible.
I know, it is incredible.
Our bodies are so resilient.
Yep. And one thing I never was able to do was really run, but just this last summer, I started running. So now I'm actually running 2-3 miles a day, which is really amazing. It feels great. My health is good.
That's great. And what about your diet?
I've modified my diet, mostly with salt, keep sodium low to keep my blood pressure down. I don't eat a lot of saturated fats, but I do enjoy steak, and I enjoy every food. I just don't eat very much of it. What I mostly eat would be chicken, fish, and low fat, low sodium diet. But I don't deny myself, and I don't drink a lot of alcohol. I have a glass of wine.
So a lot of good lessons here for folks. You have to be aware of these warning signs.
Yeah, I wish I'd gone. I wasn't seeing a doctor at all. I didn't even have a primary care physician. And had I gone to a doctor, I probably would have found out that I had high blood pressure, and they probably would have done blood tests and would have found out that I had cholesterol, and I would have been on a statin much earlier. Because it's not just your heart. I mean, your carotid artery, can cause stroke, all kinds of things. And as much as I didn't want to have the medications, I read about statins, and they're probably one of the most studied drugs on the market. So they're not a terrible thing to be taking. And the rest of the blood, the beta blocker and blood pressure drugs, I'm on minimal amounts because I take care of myself.
David, what are you most passionate about these days?
That's a huge question. I don't know. There are so many things that I'm interested in. I don't know about passion, because I find when I get overly passionate about things, I tend to get more in an addictive frame of mind, or get obsessed with them. So I tend to try to live a balanced life. I meditate, I read. I'm back to reading again because I think we get too involved with computers and stuff, and I think just a book, it's so low tech, but it forces your brain to do things that it doesn't do if you're on a computer. It's not the same thing. So I'm reading again.
And you're meditating.
And I'm meditating. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
I found this space. There's this app called Headspace. Have you heard of it?
Absolutely.
I found it, and actually I saw a documentary on. I was feeling a little depressed, and after the surgery, I found this documentary that said that there is evidence that if you can retrain your brain, and one of them is meditation, and one of them is simply look at smiling faces, and there's an app for it. I can't remember what. I did that for a while, but I didn't really find that too much for me. But meditation, definitely, especially guided meditation, I really like it. And Headspace has been great. I really enjoy it. In fact, I found a lot of people are doing it. This guy must be making very good money.
Yes.
I wonder if it's his plan B.
That's right.
But I'm now, I'm just trying to put things in order. Like, I'm making sure that I paint almost every day, making sure that I run, making sure that I spend time one-on-one with people, or just connecting doing face-to-face with people. I just enjoy a lot simpler life at this point. I suppose it's part of getting older. I mean, I lived in downtown Boston in the South End for 26 years.
Running hard.
Oh, I loved that time. I loved Boston. I thought I was going to die in Boston. I thought, this is where I'm going to live till I die. I really did enjoy it because I loved all the life, and just you just walk out your door and everything's right there. And it was incredible. But when I was done with it, I was done with it. And now I live in a home on 4 acres, and my husband and my 3 dogs, and every evening we sit down to dinner and we say our blessings. I'm very thankful for the life that I have right now. And so when you say passion, I guess what I'm passionate about, just being present and being successful at being present. I think that's a skill that is very, very difficult in this day and age, is not being seduced by so many seductive things, or being distracted by all the distractions and noise out there. Just trying to enjoy your life.
Well, you mentioned you don't watch the news too often.
I don't watch the news really at all.
Yeah, I shut down about 3 or 4 months ago, and it's the best thing I ever did because it was just so distracting.
It is.
And you can't be creative in when you're watching the news and thinking about those things. So
I don't find the news to be that engaging anymore. I mean, it used to be much more in depth. They really check their facts. Right now, it's these sound loops. It's just little bite-sized pieces of news. The top stories. It's all the top stories. There's nothing in depth anymore. Possibly NPR might have some interesting pieces, but it's more in a documentary form. I'll enjoy documentaries that are talking about current issues. I mean, I like an in-depth report, and I do subscribe to New York Times on my phone. And when I have time, which is rare, but I'll sit down and rather than Facebook, I'll read an article in the New York Times, usually the op-ed or something like that. But I find that the news to be, so much of it is so far off there, it doesn't affect me at all. And I think when you get older, you get a little less interested in the entire world's issues. You start realizing that time is not infinite, and it's time. Right at this point in time in my life, I'm young enough to enjoy my life. I'm young enough to be able to do what I want to do. I'm not incapacitated anyway. So I'm determined to cross off a few things on my bucket list that I want to do now while I can. There are other things that don't require as much of me that I'll do those later. And then
Such as?
bucket list, travel. Travel's a big one. Because I don't think, I think when you start ailing, travel becomes more stressful and more difficult. Right now, I'm at a perfect age where you can go on a trip and travel and enjoy it, really enjoy it. And I feel very blessed that I can do that. So,
Sure. What are some of your latest, most recent trips?
we just took a 3-week trip to Europe. We went to London and Amsterdam, and then took a river cruise up the Rhine. And that was an amazing trip. And also, one of the amazing things was, and I didn't think about this when I booked the trip, but we went through Bavaria, Germany, and that's where the Schuman family was from.
Okay.
And I actually was not far from where a great-great-grandfather, Johann Schumann, because we had an extra H in our name back then. It was Schuhmann, where he lived. And he came over in the 1800s. But it was, I saw the name Schumann a lot there, and just being in that part of the country and realizing that my heritage, my German heritage, it was interesting to be around that. I feel comfortable around Germany, and I feel comfortable in Northern Europe as a rule, and those are parts of the world that most of my family is from, so I identify with it.
Have you been able to tap into, I guess, your creative unconscious, you're doing the meditation, count your blessings every day. Is that something that you feel you found?
I feel very passionate about that. I do. After my surgery, you're very raw after heart surgery. It's amazing that you realize that one of the things that you feel after you've come out of heart surgery, and it's not frightening, but you do kind of realize that you died and came back. There's this feeling that you get. And not to mention, it's your heart, so you realize that you came that close to the edge. So life was rather different. And it was very raw in the beginning. I mean, the littlest things made me cry. It was a good thing, but I was overwhelmed by so much. And I knew that would fade, but I was determined to take that lesson. And to small things where, I've always wanted to become more present. Being present is something that I've been able to be better at. And then also counting my blessings. And I just, decided that at mealtime, I do want to say what I'm thankful for. At every meal, we are thankful for our home and our families and our health and our meal and for each other and whatever else happened that day. So we just take a moment and just think about our day and what we're thankful for. And it's amazing how blessed that, it makes you realize even with the stuff that's going on in the world, you can carve out your blessings in this life and in this world. And I think it's unfortunate too many people are so seduced by what's out there that they're not realizing how much they have right here.
Is it okay to be vulnerable?
It's important. It's more than okay. I think it's necessary, but not a real popular thing right now, being vulnerable. Women have always been interested in being vulnerable and take value in that. Men, not so much, but I think more so now. I mean, it's certainly you're seeing more vulnerability. I think that's where Hollywood can make an impression, showing characters that are vulnerable and the benefits of vulnerability. That's where failing comes in. I mean, it's a good thing to learn. Children should learn to fail and learn that there's no shame in it. It's actually part of growing and learning. You can't learn if you don't fail. And you have to learn to fail in order to learn better. So that's part of being vulnerable, is failing. And being okay with it. I don't think you have to like it or be proud of it. But I think you have to learn to be good with it. You know, it's okay.
And sometimes being vulnerable maybe help you find that plan B.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Just letting your guard down a little bit.
I have a very good friend right now who is doing Plan B. I mean, she opened up a gallery and she opened up a barber and hair salon. And it just has not worked out for her the way she wanted. And it's just been really, really hard. This is my best friend. And just to watch her suffer through this has been very difficult. And then one day she decided to start she said, no one's selling t-shirts or memorabilia with a New Hope on it. So she started a new business called New Hope Stuff. And she had a barber shop in the salon, and that was her centerpiece, what she really wanted to do. She couldn't get a barber to come in. She couldn't get it to run. And the day that she made the change and started taking the barber shop apart, she called me crying because it was just so painful for her. But it was her Plan B, and it's working. So far, it's the first thing that she's felt hopeful about in a long time, and I think that, you know, it demonstrates what Plan B is all about. You do have to get to that point where you fail, and you have to recognize that it's not working. Time to try another thing, you know.
And that's okay.
You got to be okay with it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get stuck, and then you can go all the way down.
Right.
You know? And it just gets worse and worse.
Well, she's definitely in the right town, New Hope.
Yeah, I think New Hope's a great name to put on anything.
Absolutely.
What a great, and why nobody else in New Hope was selling t-shirts and mugs and all that stuff. And I'm sure someone else will start doing it, but I think she's ahead of it now, and she's got some great ideas. It's a very artistic town, and now she wants to start inviting artists to design t-shirts and stuff and have collections of stuff. So I think that it has a lot of possibilities.
Do you have any fears?
Oh, yeah, tons. I'm actually that was one of the things, you know, coming out of the heart surgery and everything, there was a lot of anxiety about my health. And I actually ended up going into therapy about it. I went to see a specific therapist that dealt with patients that had had open heart surgery. And I had lost faith in my ability to have health. And I think anybody who goes through any health crisis, I'm sure has that. It's a terrible feeling. And I needed to let go of that. And she helped me. So, I still have anxieties. I can be quite an anxious person. If left to my own devices, I can just go into full-blown anxiety. That's where meditation, I think, helps balance you. I think we live in a very anxious society. I mean, listen to commercials, media are always telling you, do you need this? Do you need that? Or are you okay? Any health report tells you, are you eating, drinking, doing the right things for your body? And those things change constantly because a new lobbyist group wants to lobby for their food stuff.
Right.
You know, it's very confusing. There's so much noise. So getting away from that helps with the anxiety and the fear. But now, basically, now that I've kind of gotten myself away from that and I'm meditating and paying attention and being present, the fear tends to leave, and I'm quite hopeful right now. Because I'm clearly looking at what's going on, and yes, there's a lot of bad going on, but it's not being hidden, which I think is one of the greatest things. And I think that things will change eventually. People will get tired of it. I mean, the reaction against the current administration was this election, which was tremendous. I think the American population came out, and Republicans and Democrats voted for candidates that they felt had a more progressive agenda. I think that this ultra-right conservative agenda is it's not going to survive. It's not sustainable. It's not healthy for the country. It's not healthy for people. It's only healthy for a small, select few people who financially benefit from it. And they have a lot of power. The Koch brothers have a lot of power.
Yeah.
And they're families like that are driving this, and they're not going to give up easily. So the battle is not over. But I think that conservatism needs to be readjusted because it's necessary. Because we need that balance. I still believe in a two-party system. I still believe in the democratic process. I still think it's working. I think Trump is an example of the fact that it's working. The pendulum can swing wildly.
Right.
And that's what's happening right now. We got complacent, and that's what happened.
And aren't extremes in any regard just outright wrong?
Our extremes, I don't know whether, I guess they're wrong if
I guess
when you
what I'm
hurt
saying is,
people, when people get hurt and harmed, and it's the result of an extreme, yes.
right.
But I think that extremes happen just because it's the way life works. I mean, the pendulum gets in balance, life gets in balance, everything calms down, and people feel, they get complacent because, hey, life is good. Why bother? Let's not mess with it. And then stuff happens, and then the pendulum starts swinging wildly back and forth because arguments happen, 2 points of view, and then it gets wild. This is a very extreme swing, but it's on both sides. I mean, Democratic, the liberal agenda has gotten a little crazy too. Where I think that the whole legalization of drugs is an argument that it's a little ahead of its time right now. I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I certainly think that it's a good thing in keeping the money out of the black market. But I don't know about whether it's a good thing for the health of people.
I guess that was my point. Is just
I'm sure there's going to be people that argue with me on that one, but
yeah, but the balance is just key.
Yeah.
In anything.
we have
Anything
to.
in life.
We need to get more in balance. Things need to come to the middle more.
That's right.
And into a place where it's safe to talk. I'm by religion, I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and I remember one of the sermons that our minister gave after the election basically stated that as Unitarian Universalists, it's our duty to, as much as we do not approve of racial injustice and all of that that's going on with the current administration is actually catering to racism. We have to still keep the lines of communication open. You can't overly judge that. You have to allow there to be communication. You can't shut people off, whether you agree with them or not. And I thought that was very brave for that sermon, because they're right. I mean, if we shut down the ultra-right conservative party and say, you have no rights, that's not, you can't do that. But we have to talk. If we don't talk, then nothing can happen. Nobody can, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to get done.
Yeah. David, if you could go back and talk to your 20-year-old self, what advice would you have?
Get into therapy immediately. I would have said, get to a therapist so that you can get yourself right, so you could maybe have a child. I mean, probably my one regret is that I don't have children, but I know why I didn't. I wasn't mature enough to have kids, and I wasn't well enough mentally to have children when I was that young. I think it would have created a very stressful environment. I mean, I don't think any parent is, ready to have kids when they have kids, but I think that, given everything I was coping with, my sexuality and drug addiction and stuff like that. It's just, that's nothing, you just can't have children. And it was way too selfish for that, self-absorbed. And so if I could say anything to myself back then, I would have said, get into therapy and learn about yourself, and then work to having a child. It would have been a lovely thing to have done.
What do you feel your purpose is
Now,
now?
I think my purpose now is to set an example to those around me, just to be the best person I can be, and to live my life in a way that inspires other people to live their life in a good way. And the people that are around me, I try to help them as best I can.
Okay, well, this has been phenomenal. This has been a great conversation. You have a wonderful story.
Thanks.
Such a pleasure to have you here. But before I let you go,
Okay.
there's one last question, and that is, what do you want your legacy to be?
That's something I thought about a lot recently. Because as you get older, you think about what's going to happen when you're gone. I don't know. I don't know that there's going to be much of a legacy. I think legacy is there are not many people in the world who get to leave a legacy behind. It's something that you need to build your whole life. It's not something that you can build later on. I will leave a legacy of kindness and compassion, I hope, and people that love me behind. But I think that'll all be pretty fleeting. I don't want to fool myself into think that people are going to remember that much about me. Maybe, I hope it would be nice if some paintings got appreciated and handed down and kept and not destroyed. That would be a nice thing if someone kept a couple of my paintings. But I can't expect much more than that.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much. Thanks for spending the time, and thank you for being part of the American Real family.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Dave.